formed the constitution of this country. Now, when the DCJ started to talk about the evolution of the constitution of South Africa, then he mentions the countries that they went to learn from. He mentioned 4 countries, and in fact, okay, I'll tell you the countries. He said they went to India, they went to India, they went to Canada, they went to America, they went to Germany, and then obviously the Magna Carta is a UK document. Now, I thought that, maybe it's not being exhaustive, he just mentioned to name but a few. And this worried me, that how come there is no African country mentioned in here? So, I mean, we've got countries like Egypt, we've got countries like Ghana, there are various systems that have been there that I'm sure there's 1 or 2 things that could have been picked up as we were to put this thing together. So during tea break, I went to him to say, hey, DCJ, he's a very sociable chap. Don't know about him when he's in the bench. But generally, he's a very sociable guy. So I speak to him to say, hey, DCJ, now what is this now? In this list of countries, are you saying we never went to an African country? Is that list exhaustive? I was disappointed to hear that in fact that list was exhaustive. So we're sitting here with a constitution that has been largely informed by the experiences and the whatever else of other countries that are not African. And somehow we are confused. Why is it that this constitution, for some reason, it's a beautiful document and all that it's claimed, but somehow, despite this constitution, we continue to have poverty in this country. Despite this constitution, we continue to have inequality in this country. What is wrong in this constitution? There's customary law mentioned in the constitution, but even that customary law has to succumb to what lawyers call the doctrine of repugnancy. So what that doctrine speaks to the situation where if there's any inconsistency, that customary law must count down to international law, must count down to Roman Dutch law. Now, you see, when you say you are free, that should mean you should be free to do what you've always wanted to do. When you say you are free, that should mean you are free to be who you are. Can you truly say you are free in a situation where your freedom is still curtailed? In fact, the reason why the ANC continues to have its support sort of softened, the reason that happens is because the ANC is a progressive organization. What it does, they go to conferences. I go to conferences of the ANC, make progressive policies and everything, come back. But most of those policies, trust me, they don't talk to what the Constitution provides for. This is why ANC loses so many cases in court. It goes there with a good intent to say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But for some reason, they actually constrained as it were. Let me give one quick example. I was in Polokwane when the resolution of the labor brokers was taken. Why is it that was not implemented? At the time, I was also a DG in the Department of Labor. Trust me, I had a mission to make sure that this thing happens. I couldn't do it. And the reason I couldn't do it is because Section 22 of the Constitution gives power to, or a right to freedom of trade, freedom of this, freedom of that. So in terms of that clause, you actually can't ban anything that is deemed trade. If you ban anything, you are being unconstitutional. That's why, but for some reason, I don't understand why the ANC is not explaining what I think is a simple thing to COSATU and others. People still keep calling for this banning of the labor brokers and so on. Trust me, it's not going to happen because it will be unconstitutional as it were. So my point of departure is that we're sitting here with a captured constitution in the first place. So the whole condition is
Swag.
Now, President Zuma, with all the insults that you can have, trust me, President Zuma is the best person to take us out of this morass. Let me tell you why. It helps a lot that President Zuma does not have MBA. It really helps. He is such a human being. I don't know, if you've never had the pleasure of interacting with a man, just make it your resolve that you don't die before you meet the man. You then see the essence of the human being as it were. He gets insulted, he gets all kinds of things put on his. In fact, I don't want to go back to Uganda issues, but even if you were to go there, you will find that the actual people that should have taken the blame are the accounting officers who do the requisitions and all that. But let's put that aside and just move forward. He then goes on to do a whole range of things. One of the things that he has done is to lead the country in the BRICS initiative. Now, what does BRICS mean? BRICS, actually there's a tension between BRICS and the G7. So it's important to understand that tension and what that tension means. That is a serious economic tension. And I'm coming to the media just now. I'm just laying the ground so I can understand why the media behaves in this reactionary manner in which it's behaving. Now, you have the BRICS, you have the G7 countries, and their instrument of interaction are the various banks. They've got in the G7, the World Banks of this world, they've got IMFs, and the BRICS has got the BRICS Bank. Now the BRICS Bank will borrow you money, and all they're interested in is pay their money back. These other ones, they borrow you money, but they put all kinds of conditions to interfere with your sovereignty. They want to interfere with your economic policy, they want to interfere with your purchasing capabilities, your procurement issues, because these banks, for instance, if you look at the issues around energy in this country, government had to fight hard to be able to secure the issue of ensuring that we've got nuclear. And the reason you want to have nuclear in the mix, as it were, is because as we speak now, there are no nuclear plants ready in South Africa. So for you to establish nuclear capability in this country, you're going to create so many jobs, it's not funny during the establishment of that. And also purely from a science point of view, nuclear has got much cleaner energy, much lesser waste than all these others. But the important thing about that, about the difference between nuclear and your various other renewable energies like solar and windmills and whatever, it's where these things are manufactured. So all the sellers of the solar, the sellers of the windmills, all of these people, they want to use South Africa as a dumping ground. So then they would want to force our economic policy to be biased towards those things because they want to sell us, they see us as a market. So see, when you are in the BRICS space, you are seen as a consumer, and the G7 sees themselves as producers. Now they have to create a world order that is going to maintain the producer's capability and maintain the consumer's capabilities. Now, if the consumers want to be producers, you are upsetting the cat. You shouldn't be doing that. Yours is just to buy. Don't try and do anything clever here. This is the situation. So with the approach and the inroads that President Zuma is making with the BRICS, is actually upsetting this. Now, companies in South Africa are generally all linked to these international companies. If you look at our stock exchange, we're sitting with a 15 trillion rand stock exchange in this country. 35% of that is owned internationally. So we don't even own this economy as it were. And I don't want to even talk about the 3% that we own in South Africa. So when we talk about the state capital, I argue that in fact the whole economy of this country is captured by what monopoly capital. They've been very clever. You know, I think it's important for us, if we were to fix this, we must see how we've been outmaneuvered. Even some of you might be in the room that would have been involved when we did the BE Commission thing through the BMF and other black organizations and what have you. So we did that report, a very powerful report that spoke about the land, spoke other things I'm talking about. I challenge you to go and look at the BE Commission report. It's on the website. Read that, you will see that all the things that are causing us to fight today, they were in that report. But if you look at that report and you look at how the Broad-Based BE Act has become a serious watered-down version of what we wanted. In fact, the land issue is not even in the BE whatever, but in that BCom report that we done as black organizations at the time, which handed to the ruling party at the time, Mpemnyama was still the deputy president and all that, it has been watered down badly. Now, this is the same thing that happens to ANC policies. Now, those of you that have been involved in policy development would know that you take a resolution in Bulukwane and Manyi and what have you, you come back to government, and then minister will then the government takes a position on the matter that this is what we're going to do, then it becomes government policy, and then the DG then gets given the brief to say start developing legislation to be able to talk to this policy. And this is where this thing begins. Now, when the accounting officer starts this thing, when you're a DG, you're the head of the department, you're going to be running around doing all these technical detailed work when you go to DGs. Okay? Now, a DG is a political appointment. Then you send it over to a DG who's going to hand over to a chief director, who's going to hand over to a director. By the time, and in that process, then there's time, then there's an opportunity or there's a case made to get a legal input, research input. In that process, I'm telling you, this thing is watered down like you don't believe it. And by the time it's finished, it's no longer what you wanted it to be. But you are told that this is now, it gets sent to impact analysis, and all of this gets measured by the monopoly kind of what monopoly instruments to make sure that it must not mess things up, this thing. When this policy goes to NETLEC, they will find the business representatives in NETLEC, people that represent your organized business, are there to make sure that this policy is not going to do things that they don't want it to do. And they change it, and people, they beat you with frustrations. You end up saying, okay, just so that. This is the truth. Because people are saying, but when have been waiting for this, people are putting pressure, you agree. Then when the minister takes this policy to Parliament, firstly, because it's taken by a minister to Parliament, there's an ANC study group there that's going to look at this. The fact that it's being presented by a minister already tells credibility. So the comrades that sit there, they look at it, but with the 50% is already saying this must be fine. Comrades so-and-so would have looked at this. And we've got DG Manyi there, I'm sure you will agree with this. So the level of scrutiny does not go to as deep a level as it should. So then you end up with this thing. Now, why would then it end up with a law like PFMA, with a triple PFA? Now let me explain very briefly how these two work together to impoverish black people. And these are laws that we pass in this government. PFMA will say to you two things. One, there's PFMA and then there's also MFMA for municipalities. Embedded in those policies is that if you are to use a service provider, an international service provider, there's a built-in deviation there. You don't have to follow process and what have you. because it's international. Now you know what international means. It means UK, it means all these colonial people as well. So we've got a South African government law that will say that it's fine. Now this is the essence of capture. Then we'll have something again there that will say, you know, something that will serve your heart is some people like yourselves that for these innovative ideas. You bring an innovative idea, look at this idea and say, wow, this is going to work. But then the process is going to say, take it to tender. You take it to tender because that's the process. If you don't do that, then it's your crony that you put in. Then you've got public protector in your case. Then you've got everybody, then you get arrested and all that. So you're going to put this thing in a tender. You put this thing in a tender, guess who's going to get it? White monopoly capital. Because what you do, you give it, you put a tender, you say this is what must be done. They look at it, they've got capacity, they've got resources, they do it even better, and so on. And then you lose out, and then tomorrow you see this thing being executed, but it was your idea. And you see it being executed, and you are not even a 10% owner of the proceeds of that idea. That is the law. The law is there to make sure that you get nothing out of this thing. Now, once I know Andrea wants me to stop. Yeah, I'm going to stop in 2 minutes. And then we've got triple PFA. This triple PFA is the most draconian piece of legislation, which says that between 80 and 90% of the points you must allocate to the cheapest price. Now tell me, how can black people that started getting out of apartheid ever compete on equal footing with white people? As a black service provider, you do not have economies of scale that the white person has. As a new and emerging black company, you do not have the kind of interest rate that the white monopoly capital has. They pay prime -2, you pay prime +5. Your operation costs, if you have to live in a lady and you have to supply somebody desks and chairs or whatever, some housing department in Commissioner Street, and you're competing with somebody in Weinberg, white company in Weinberg that is like 10 kilometers to get there. Your cost of bringing this thing here are going to be far higher than this person. So, but the policy says lowest price. So is it possible to compete in that environment with a black person? No, you can't compete. But then you have people that are going to sit there and look upright and say, you want a transparent system, you want an efficiency. I'm not going to buy this bottle of water for 12 rand from you when I can get it for 10 rand from this other white person. But they forget that this person is from Weinberg, I'm from Naledi. You know? Now, what do we have at the end of the day? So what we have actually at the end of the day, you've got two very powerful pieces of legislation that have, in a very elegant way, sending a very clear message that, frankly, before I get there, the last point about PFMA, you know, if you go and present your annual report in Parliament, the very first question they want to know is the deviation in terms of your budget. If your budget was 100 million, they want to know how much did you spend. If you are only allowed to deviate by up to only 5%. If you have deviated more than 5%, maybe you spend 70% or 50% of the budget, it's a misconduct. Now, what does that mean? It means this legislation is saying, spend as much money as you can to white monopoly capitals. This is law. If you do not do that, it's a misconduct. So this is the kind of thing that we have. Then we've got CIDB, which is the Construction Industry Development Board, which also monitors construction. That same policy would then say to you that, look, for you to be able to build a bridge, you must be level 9. And for you to be level 9, you must have reserves of so many billions, you must have so many engineers. They count everything that as a black person you can have. Now you tell me, why is it that we've got laws like this? So I'm arguing that we've got a very captured economy and all that. And for me, people will put a Gupta label on me. I'm saying the Guptas are a red herring. The main issue is the 97% of the untransformed economy. Now, this media is important to understand what is media. Media is a business. That's what it is. They are a business. They have positioned themselves as the watchdog. They're not actually watchdog. They're just a business. They are watchdogs of their own interests and nothing else. Parliament is the statutory body that is supposed to look after the people's interests, not media. Media is just a business. That's really what they are. They are just a business. They're selling newspapers. They've got profit and loss to look after. They want something to sell. That's why, because of the business interests, they are prepared to compromise on quality, compromise on research, compromise on verifying the story simply because the story is going to sell. If they say Manyi stole 20 billion, headline, or Mpemnyama did this, headline, that's all they're interested in because they've got papers to sell. So, in conclusion, I want to say it's important to see media really for what it is, because what they then do is, because they're part of business, they have to now reinforce a narrative that supports this. So one of the narratives that will be supported is to say everybody is trying to loot national treasure. When national treasure, as we see here and now, is the center of oppressing black people. Telling you, as we see here and now, it is the conscience for white monopoly capital to continue to perpetuate the poverty that we have. And then they would line up on a kind of narrative that if you chase away Gordon, you are chasing away the only person that was protecting this treasure. When in fact they want to maintain the system and so on. And lastly, when we talk about media transformation, it's important to check the whole value chain from printing. Some of you would be in community media, you would know that you would run maybe a weekly newspaper or a monthly newspaper, and by the time you want to go to print, they decide that no, we've got much more urgent work, they don't print your stories. They will see you next week. By the time they print your thing next week, your stories are already obsolete, and nobody wants to buy your paper. This is how they suppress the growth of the new media. Let's do it. This man is panicking on my left. Let me stop.
I'm panicking because I had been quite Stalinist with the two previous speakers. Now, because in the interest of time, I'm not going to ask all my questions, but I do want to ask one question. I'll start with a question I had, which was the last question. Don't answer that question. Maybe when we reflect, it will be answered. But it is 22 years later after the ANC rule. And if it is true that media is so concentrated and the economic power is still in such few hands, what explains this? Because there must be an explanation. I don't think the narrative that says the ANC is outmaneuvered is sufficient. We need to look at the contestations within the ANC and see if, in fact, there's any factions in the ANC which are pushing an agenda of the people. The ANC is in power 22 years later. We need to see what is its responsibility in having maintained the status quo. Okay, that is just the question I don't want an answer to. But let us give this panel a big hand for their input before we begin. My first question, maybe it will be the only question I have, is a conceptual question. It's a conceptual question. And maybe to attempt to drive a understanding of what the problem is. Now, let's start from the beginning. What is the state? We talk about state capture, but what is the state? And what is its role in a capitalist society such as ours? And bearing in mind that South African capitalism is essentially racist. So what is the state? What is its role? And bearing in mind that South African state, or capitalism rather, is essentially racist. Now, in the literature, there are two general understandings of the state, each reflecting a particular ideological interest. On the one hand, the ideological orientation of the rulers. In the literature, you will see following the Marxist tradition, they say the rulers put them as the bourgeoisie. They have a conception or an understanding of the state. And in South African context, the bourgeoisie is white. There is no black bourgeoisie. The black bourgeoisie is a dependent, terrified, indebted group of black people who are trying to make it. And if Rupert says you are not going to make it, you are not going to make it. So let us not play that game. I mean, for me, this idea of the no existence of the black bourgeoisie was dramatized by the Guptas. Imagine you think that you are in the game, and then you are told your bank's accounts are shut down. Now you have your money in your plastic bags, you're trying to find who can take your money, and no one's going to take your money because Rupert said these people's money must not be taken. That's what happened. So you call the Guptas the bourgeoisie? No, these guys have a little bit of money, and their money is not helping them because it's not enough. So okay, the bourgeoisie in the South African context are white people, the white capital. And their perspective on the state is that the state is neutral. In other words, the state is there to regulate the interests of society. The state is above society. This is the perspective of the rulers. This is the ideology they preserve. On the other hand, if you follow literature, then they say, but the ruled, and in the South African context, the ruled is black people. They also should have a perspective, and if you follow the Marxist tradition, then they say, actually the state is the committee to look after the collective interests of the ruling class. The state is a committee to look after the interests of the ruling class, the collective interests of the ruling class. So from the point of view of the rule, the state is not neutral. The state is an instrument of power. Now, if this is true, and I accept that proposition, the South African state, as most people said, has always been captured. Captured by whom? By white capital. It was created and captured by white capital, the South African state. In 1994, the ANC did not destroy that state. So that is why these problems that Mzwanele is talking about are perpetuated. So the question is, if this is true, the state as it is in South Africa is still captured by whites, what is going on? Why those who have captured the state claiming that the state has been captured? Now, I think Zimasa spoke about how did the captured us become the capturers? Mm-hmm. The power of the narrative of the ruling party or the ruling powers to turn the truth around. The captured become the capturers. How did that happen? Because I don't think unless we understand this, we're not going to understand why there's conversation of state capture. State capture is about the Guptas and Zuma. Let us go back to the original question. What is the state? Who has captured the state? And why are today we're having a conversation that says the state captured, when the state is already captured? What is going on there? So I'll give you 2 minutes each to have a bite on this, and then we'll give to the audience. Thank you. You want to go first?
Yeah, look, I think the problem on complex issues is when the question is phrased in the manner